The first thing Leo noticed wasn't the screaming, though that came soon enough. It was the smell. A coppery, metallic tang that cut through the usual exhaust fumes and stale city air of downtown Chicago. He was on his lunch break, leaning against a grimy brick wall, watching pigeons peck at discarded fries near the bus stop. Then, a woman, her face a mask of terror, stumbled out of a cafe, a dark stain blooming on her blouse. She didn't see him. She was looking past him, her eyes wide, vacant, fixed on something, or someone, behind the overflowing trash cans. And then it happened. A man, moving with an unnatural, jerky gait, lunged from the alley. His teeth, bared in a grotesque rictus, sank into the woman's arm. She shrieked, a raw, animal sound, and Leo's breath hitched. This wasn't a fight. This was something else. More people poured out of buildings, not running from danger, but into it, their movements shambolic, their eyes glazed. They were wrong. Twisted. They didn't seem to register the chaos, only the primal urge to consume. Leo watched, frozen, as a businessman, Ty Askew, bit into the neck of a screaming pedestrian. The sheer, unadulterated savagery of it was a physical blow. His carefully constructed reality, the predictable rhythm of his office job, the familiar hum of the city, shattered like glass. Panic, cold and sharp, began to seep into his bones. He needed to get out. Now. But where? His apartment was across town, through streets that were rapidly becoming a charnel house. He saw a family huddled in a doorway, the mother desperately trying to shield her child, her face a picture of abject terror as a shambling figure approached. Leo's stomach churned. He felt a desperate urge to help, but his feet were glued to the pavement. He was just one man, and the sheer scale of the unfolding horror was paralyzing. He finally broke free of his stupor, his legs pumping as he ran, not towards anything, but away. Away from the sounds of tearing flesh, away from the moans of the infected, away from the dawning realization that the world he knew was gone. He ducked into a narrow side street, hoping for a less direct route. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant noise sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He saw a dropped wallet, a spilled coffee, the detritus of normal life now coated in a surreal layer of dread. The air was thick with the scent of fear and something else, something rotten. This is insane, he thought, panting, trying to control the tremor in his hands. I'm going to die out here. But the survival instinct, raw and unyielding, kicked in. He needed a plan. He needed supplies. He needed to avoid them. What would you do? If you saw this, if you were here, in this alley, with the sounds of the dead getting closer, what would be your first move? Would you try to find others? Or would you just focus on staying alive, no matter the cost? I'm recording this, I guess, as some kind of final log. If anyone ever finds this, just know, it happened fast. So fast. Don't forget to hit that like button, if you're still watching, and subscribe. Maybe someone can learn from this. The flickering streetlights cast long, dancing shadows, making every discarded box and overflowing dumpster seem like a lurking threat. He kept his breathing shallow, trying to push down the frantic thumping in his chest. The guttural groans were closer now, a symphony of hunger that scraped at his nerves. He didn't dare look behind him. The brief glimpse he'd caught earlier was enough. Too much. He focused on the narrow opening at the far end of the alley, a sliver of hope in the suffocating darkness. He shuffled his feet, each scuff of his worn shoe on the grimy pavement sounding like a siren. He risked a quick glance to his left. Another figure, slumped against a brick wall, unmoving. Friend or foe? He couldn't tell, and frankly, he didn't have the energy to care. His priority was that alley exit. If he could just reach it, maybe he could find a clearer path, a place to regroup, a chance. The idea of finding others, of forming some kind of desperate unit, flitted through his mind, but the sheer, overwhelming proximity of them shoved it back. Survival, raw and immediate, was the only thought that mattered. He heard a scraping sound from his right, a wet, dragging noise that sent a fresh wave of dread through him. He bolted. Not a sprint, but a desperate, ragged run, his legs burning. He didn't know if they were fast, not really, but the sounds of their movement were disorienting, a cacophony of shuffling, moaning, and that sickening drag. He could feel the air grow colder, or perhaps it was just the icy grip of fear on his skin. The alley walls seemed to press in on him, the graffiti blurring into indistinct shapes of horror. He was almost at the opening, the faint moonlight beckoning him. Then, a shape detached itself from the deeper shadows directly in front of him, blocking his escape. It wasn't like the others he'd seen. This one moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, its head lolling at an impossible angle. Its eyes, or what remained of them, were wide and vacant, yet fixed on him with an unnerving intensity. He skidded to a halt, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. There was nowhere else to go. The groans behind him were now a chorus, closing in. He fumbled in his pocket, his fingers closing around something smooth and metallic. Not a weapon, not really. Just a pipe wrench he'd found earlier. It felt ridiculously inadequate. The figure in front of him let out a low, rasping sound, a sound that promised nothing but oblivion. Its arms, gangly and stiff, began to extend towards him. He could see the decay, the torn flesh, the skeletal structures beneath. The stench was overpowering, a putrid mix of rot and something far worse. He braced himself, his knuckles white around the wrench. The alley behind him was no longer a distant threat, it was a tangible wall of sound and movement. He could feel their presence pressing in, a suffocating tide. He swung the wrench, a wild, desperate arc, but it felt like swatting at smoke. The creature in front of him didn't flinch. It just kept coming. The impact of the wrench against the creature's head was less than he'd hoped. It barely staggered. Its face, if it could be called that, was a shifting mess of shadows and something that looked like burnt flesh. He heard the slithering sound again, closer this time, and knew he wasn't going to win a direct fight. He needed to move, to find an exit, any way out of this narrow, foul-smelling trap. He dropped the wrench, a clatter that seemed to echo for miles in his ears, and bolted. He ran deeper into the labyrinth of alleyways, the sounds of pursuit a constant, chilling reminder that he was not alone. Each turn brought a new wave of the same oppressive smell, a miasma that clung to everything. He risked a glance over his shoulder. Two of them, indistinct shapes against the gloom, were gaining on him. Their movement was unnervingly fluid, not quite walking, not quite crawling. He pushed harder, lungs burning, legs screaming. He needed to reach the main street, the sliver of light he'd seen earlier, before they closed the distance. He rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. A dead end. A towering brick wall, slick with some unknown grime, blocked his path. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his exhaustion. He turned, wrench still clutched in his sweaty hand, but the alley behind him was now a solid mass of darkness, teeming with the shapeless horrors. There was nowhere left to run. He could hear them now, a low, guttural chittering that vibrated in his bones. He raised the wrench, a futile gesture, but he wouldn't go down without a fight. He braced himself for the inevitable, the world narrowing to this single, terrifying moment. Then, a sound from above. A scraping, then a clang. He looked up, squinting into the oppressive darkness. A section of the wall, near the top, was moving. It wasn't brick, it was metal, a rusted grate, being forced open. A hand, calloused and grimy, reached down, then another. A rope snaked its way into the alley. He didn't hesitate. He scrambled up the rough rope, the creatures below us snarling, reaching chaos. He clawed his way over the edge, collapsing onto a grimy rooftop, gasping for air. He looked back down into the alley. The figures were still there, their forms indistinct but their menace palpable. They couldn't follow. He was safe, for now. But as he lay there, heart hammering against his ribs, he saw them, one by one, melt back into the shadows of the alley, as if they'd never been there at all. He was alive, but the memory of what he'd seen, what had chased him, was burned into his mind. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him more than the night air, that this was just the beginning. It was Tuesday, or what used to be Tuesday. I remember because I was supposed to have that awful dentist appointment. Instead, I was crammed into the back of a grocery store, the automatic doors sealed shut with tape and desperation. Outside, the usual city hum had been replaced by a chorus of screams and guttural moans that sent shivers down my spine. From my hiding spot behind a towering display of canned peaches, I peeked through the grimy glass. That's when I saw it. A woman, the kind you'd see on the street, maybe rushing to work, was being torn apart. Not by one or two, but by a crowd. They weren't people anymore. Their eyes were vacant, milky white, and their skin, it was a sickly gray, peeling in places. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like broken puppets. They gnawed, tore, ripped. The sound was a wet, tearing symphony that made my stomach churn. I clamped my hands over my mouth, trying to stifle a sob that threatened to escape. One of them, a man with a tattered suit and a face half gone, stumbled towards the store. His head lolled sickeningly, and I swear I saw a glint of recognition in his dead eyes before he slammed his decomposing face against the glass, leaving a smear of something dark and viscous. My mind screamed run, but my legs were frozen. Every instinct told me to bolt, but where? The streets were a charnel house. I saw another one, a child, maybe 6 or 7, lurching after a dog. The child's jaw was unhinged, its tiny hands outstretched, not for play, but for the chase. It was a perversion of everything I understood about innocence. This wasn't just a disease, it was a cosmic joke played out in flesh and blood. The fear was a physical thing, a cold dread that seeped into my bones. I had to move. Staying here was a death sentence. I scanned the store, my eyes darting from aisle to aisle. Canned goods. Water. But then what? I was alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. The thought of what lay beyond these walls was almost worse than the scene outside. Every shadow, every creak of the building, made me jump. I imagined them outside, just waiting, their mindless hunger and unstoppable force. I had to find a way out, a way to survive this nightmare, but the sheer scale of it, the utter depravity, was crushing. I felt a primal urge to curl up and disappear, but the image of that woman, the child, that wasn't an option. Not anymore. The scratching at the door intensified, a frantic, scraping sound that sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't just one, but several, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, yet driven by an unnerving persistence. I pressed myself further into the corner, my breath catching in my throat. The wood of the door was old, splintered, and I could see the faint outlines of fingers, or what used to be fingers, clawing at the gaps. Panic threatened to consume me. I scanned the small room again, desperate for any sign of another escape. The boarded-up window was too high, too small, and the boards looked impossibly thick. My gaze fell on a heavy wooden desk, its surface scarred and stained. If I could just, what? Wedge it against the door. It wouldn't hold them for long. Not if there were many of them. The sheer desperation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. A sudden, sickening thud came from the other side of the wall, followed by a guttural groan. It was closer than I'd thought. The sounds were a symphony of the grotesque, a constant reminder of the horrors unfolding just beyond my fragile sanctuary. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the noise, the images that flooded my mind. The woman's vacant stare, the child's unnerving stillness, it was all too much. Then, a new sound. A low, moaning whine, distinct from the frantic scratching. It was coming from the corridor outside, a sound that spoke of something different, something perhaps even more unsettling. It was slower, more deliberate, and it seemed to echo through the very foundations of the building. I cautiously moved towards the door, straining to hear. The scratching at my door momentarily ceased, replaced by a shuffling sound as whatever was outside seemed to turn its attention elsewhere. I didn't dare breathe. The moaning grew louder, closer. It was a sound that spoke of immense suffering, of a pain that had been amplified beyond all comprehension. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. A heavy thump vibrated through the floor, directly outside my door. Silence descended, a tense, expectant silence. I could feel eyes on me, though I saw nothing. The moaning had stopped. The scratching had stopped. It was a stillness that felt more dangerous than any noise. I took a tentative step back, my gaze fixed on the door, expecting it to burst inwards at any moment. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen menace. Whatever was out there, it knew I was here. And it was waiting. The silence stretched, each second a hammer blow against my nerves. My breath hitched in my throat, a dry rasp. I scanned the small room again, as if a new hiding place might materialize out of nowhere. The rough-hewn walls offered no escape, the single wooden door my only perceived exit, and my greatest fear. Then, a slow, deliberate creak. Not the aggressive splintering I'd braced myself for, but a drawn-out groan of aged wood giving way. The door began to inch open. A sliver of darkness appeared, then widened, revealing not a face, but a shadow, impossibly long and distorted. It stretched across the floor, creeping towards me like a physical entity. I pressed myself against the back wall, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My eyes darted from the encroaching shadow to the sliver of light filtering from the corridor, searching for any sign of what lay beyond. It was too dark to make out any details, but I could feel its presence, a palpable weight pressing down on me. The creaking intensified, the door opening further. The shadow continued its advance, absorbing the meager light. I could smell something now, a faint, musty odor like damp earth and something else, something metallic and unpleasant. My muscles tensed, ready to bolt, but there was nowhere to go. I was trapped. The shadow reached the center of the room, and then, a shape began to coalesce within it. It wasn't human, not entirely. It was too tall, too gaunt, its limbs bending at unnatural angles. A faint, guttural sound emerged from the darkness, a wet, rasping noise that sent a fresh wave of terror through me. It was a sound of hunger, of something ancient and unrestrained. I squeezed my eyes shut for a fraction of a second, a futile attempt to deny what was happening, but the sounds and the encroaching cold forced them open again. The shape was closer now, its form still obscured by the deep gloom, but I could make out the glint of something sharp, something impossibly thin, extending from its elongated hand. The rasping grew louder, closer. I could feel a cold draft emanating from the opening, a chilling wave that seemed to suck the very warmth from the air. My mind raced, a desperate scramble for a plan, for any solution. But there was nothing. Only the relentless advance of the unknown. The sliver of light from the corridor seemed to shrink, swallowed by the growing darkness that filled the doorway. I braced myself for the final, inevitable moment, the touch of that cold, sharp thing, the end of my world. The darkness surged, a suffocating wave, and the world went black. And so, my journey concludes, not with a bang, but with a fading whisper. Thank you for joining me in these harrowing moments, for witnessing the echoes of a world reshaped. As you close this chapter, remember the fragile thread of normalcy and the ever-present need for vigilance. The scenarios we've navigated, however dire, serve as stark reminders that preparation is not an option, but a necessity. Take for instance, Elara's silent vigil in the abandoned observatory. For weeks, she'd meticulously charted the celestial movements, not out of scientific curiosity, but from a gnawing premonition. When the skies turned a sickly hue and the familiar sounds of civilization dissolved into an eerie silence, her understanding of the cosmos became her shield. She had long ago secured a cache of provisions, insulated her shelter from the elements, and practiced the art of silent movement, skills honed during solitary hikes in remote wilderness. Her knowledge of edible plants and water purification, learned from worn field guides, proved more valuable than any advanced technology could have been in those early days. Then there was Ben, the unassuming librarian, whose quiet life belied a hidden reservoir of resilience. When the chaos erupted, he didn't falter. His meticulous cataloging of the library's resources had included a surprising amount of practical knowledge, from basic first aid and carpentry to rudimentary understanding of mechanics. He'd even spent evenings learning Morse code, a skill he'd dismissed as a quaint hobby. But when communication lines failed, his ability to tap out coded messages to other scattered survivors, signaling safe havens and resource locations, became a lifeline. He understood, perhaps more than most, that knowledge itself, when applied, is the ultimate tool for survival. These stories, though fictionalized accounts of impossible circumstances, carry real weight. They highlight the importance of practical skills, the power of a prepared mind, and the quiet strength found in calm deliberation. In the face of overwhelming odds, panic is a luxury none can afford. When the world seems to unravel, when despair threatens to consume you, take a deep breath. Center yourself. Look for the small, tangible actions you can take. Observe. Adapt. Survive. Your own preparedness doesn't need to be an elaborate undertaking. Start small. Learn a new skill, acquire a useful tool, or simply educate yourself on the basics of emergency response. Most importantly, cultivate a mindset of resilience. Thank you for venturing into these narratives with me. If you found these stories thought-provoking or informative, I encourage you to share your own experiences or insights in the comments below. Your perspectives are invaluable. And if you wish to continue exploring these themes and perhaps discover more about navigating the unexpected, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your engagement helps us continue to provide these explorations.